everyone, Weeb here, and welcome to Remember Mii, a series of retrospectives where I highlight, reminisce, and celebrate a variety of titles from Nintendo Wii's library. With there being a large number of titles that are obscure, or some of you may have outright never even heard of, I hope to bring these games forward in order for them to not be forgotten. With that being said, let's get started with our first episode about a little game called Pandora's Tower. Having just wrapped up work on Jump All-Stars in 2006, developer Ganbarian, who up until then had only worked on licensed titles, knew that they wanted to do something original for their next project. Therefore, when Nintendo offered the team a chance to work on an original IP, they enthusiastically jumped at the offer, pitching a story with the focus on something pure being corrupted and needing to be purified again with the power of love. Despite some reservations with this pitch, Nintendo's then CEO Satoru Iwata decided to greenlight the project anyway, since Ganbarian had previously impressed Nintendo with their work, and he felt they deserved a shot at bringing their unique idea to life. Now, despite how relatively easy it was to get the project approved, development itself was a whole other story, with the team running across all sorts of issues such as the use of the Wii Remote, mixed responses from testers regarding certain gameplay features, and even trouble with picking a name for the game. When it comes to the latter, it has been said that around 5,000 titles had been suggested for the game at one point, with the final title only decided 2 months before the mastering process began. As for many of the other issues, multiple revisions were made along the way, with some aspects of the game needing to be scrapped altogether and started over from scratch. Still, when all was said and done, the game actually released to a modest commercial success, was met with mixed to positive reviews, and the developers even stated that the final product came out pretty close to their initial vision. Set in the fictional content of Imperia, Pandora's Tower begins with a young woman named Elena singing at a harvest festival when she is suddenly and mysteriously struck by a curse that makes her take on a monstrous appearance. Pursued by the king's army and desperately trying to escape the city with her lover Aaron, they receive help from a strange old woman named Mavda, who not only assists them in escaping, but leads them to the 13 Towers, an ancient fortress suspended above a ravine called the Scar. Here she explains that the only way to lift the curse from Elena and prevent her from further transforming into a monster is to feed her the flesh of masters, powerful beings residing inside the towers. Bestowed with an artifact called the Orcalis Chain, Aaron is tasked with traversing the different towers, solving environmental puzzles, and fighting his way through various foes until he can face off against and slay each of the masters, claiming their flesh for Elena to consume. Depending on whether or not you successfully give her all the flesh, as well as the strength of Aaron's relationship with Elena, leads to one of 6 different endings. Now, getting into the actual gameplay side of things, Pandora's Tower, at least for me, feels like an interesting combination of God of War, Majora's Mask, and Shadow of the Colossus, with a tiny bit of dating sim sprinkled in. That may sound pretty bizarre, but allow me to elaborate. For starters, when it comes to the combat, the fact the main character wields a chain-like weapon easily makes Kratos with his chain blades come to mind. Add to that the character action-like combo moves, the ability to swing enemies around to deal damage, and context-specific finishers, and you can start to see a resemblance to the original God of War titles. Fortunately, the bad temper and being a dick to people to solve puzzles, not included. Moving on, a big part of the game is that whenever Aaron is within the towers, a timer is ever present on the bottom left of the screen, showing the advancement of Elena's curse. Feeding flesh to Elena not only reverses the effects of the curse, but it also resets the timer. This, of course, is where my Majora's Mask comparison comes in, as this constant trying to stay ahead of the clock reminds me of the jumping through time in Termina, stretching the in-game's 3 days as far as they will go. Likewise, just like how in Majora's Mask you will find different things happening in the world depending on the time of day, the placement of foes and items will also change according to the time you visit dungeons in Pandora's Tower. It may not be a perfect one-for-one, since eventually the farther you get into Pandora's Tower, the quicker time starts to deteriorate, With its sense of dungeon exploration and puzzle solving, it has a very Zelda feel to it. On the other hand, I also get a certain Shadow of the Colossus feel to this from the tone of the game, structure, and overall objective. Similar to Shadow of the Colossus, you must find a way to target each beast's weak spot in order to take them down, and each time you defeat a boss and head back to base, you get an ominous feeling that what you're doing doesn't seem to be helping very much. It's even similar down to how the person who was pointing you along just feels odd for some reason. Like, I can't put my finger on it, but something about Baba Yaga and Jack Skellington over here seems a bit sus. I don't know, maybe it's just me though. Finally, I mentioned there being a bit of a dating sim sprinkled in, and this of course comes from Elena's affinity gauge. Similar to a dating sim in which you can build up relationships, this game allows you to strengthen the bond with your monster waifu by doing things like feeding her flesh, chatting with her, giving her gifts, and by asking her to help with tasks. While definitely one of the weirder mechanics in the game, it does surprisingly give the story a lot of heart. I mean, the more you interact with her and get to know Elena, the more she feels like a fleshed out character. This in turn leads to you actually wanting to save her and her suffering, not just doing so because the game tells you to do so. Come on, look at that smile. Who doesn't want to save that?
This better not awaken anything in me.
Now, we would be remiss to talk about Pandora's Tower if we did not talk about Operation Rainfall. Beginning in 2011, Operation Rainfall was a video game-oriented fan campaign designed to promote the North American localization of Japanese exclusive titles. 3 titles released late in the lifespan of the Wii actually made their eventual jump over to North America thanks to the attention of this campaign. 2 of these titles, Xenoblade Chronicles and The Last Story, I will be covering in future episodes, while the third is of course, Pandora's Tower. Due to Operation Rainfall, and as mentioned before, the game being a modest success, getting your hands on it for yourself isn't all too difficult. If you still have an old Wii U lying around, you can actually purchase the game digitally for about 20 USD. If you want a physical copy instead though, then good luck, as all the copies I saw on eBay were either pretty pricey, or you'd have to import them straight from Japan. At the end of the day, Pandora's Tower may not be a perfect game, but it's still the kind of thing I wish was more of a household name. Sure, the motion controls can be a bit unruly, and some might find the game to be a bit repetitive, but I still think the way it melds together all these interesting mechanics with a melancholic love story makes for a pretty great end result. Creative, gripping, and wonderfully atmospheric, I hope that this is a title that reaches out to all of you watching and says, "Remember me." If you know any other Wii games that would be a great fit for this series, let me know in the comments section below, or feel free to hit me up over on Twitter. Until next time, keep those tails fluffy and your ears clean.